understanding that you can maybe move some of the money from the well construction projects down to the service line replacement project. That gives out a pretty hefty budget.
It does.
What type of, and I know that there's the meter portion, can you provide me an estimate of the number of service lines you think we might be able to contract out for those funds?
I think it's in here in the scope of work. If it's not, it was in there's a performance measure in the application document. We've got an estimate from thankfully our district engineer, and we're not going to know for sure until we get our bids in, you know, but we will at least do a few hundred of them. You know, unfortunately, there's probably 1,300 that are, about 1,300 of them that need to be addressed. The goal would be to get half of them.
Half of the
Yeah, I mean that would be a really good number if we could get to that. I think we really have the leakage under control. We'll be able to manage the rest of it. But you know, in all reality, if they're all in the same condition and we only get half of them, you're going to hear me recommending to go forward with the rest.
Sometime back we discussed, when we were discussing this subject, I think that we determined that this actually was our biggest potential capital for the future, was to fix the service line. So nothing was as many dollars as the service line.
Replacement of the AC mains will be, you know, the majority of the mains being the asbestos cement. There are areas where once they start to fail, they fail. They become mushy. But we don't have a history of huge amounts of problems with them at this point. But that would be, you know, and of course the intake pump system is expensive as well. But this is the problem with this is it's everywhere. And so you've got a lot of work with restoring the street surface and everything else.
I remember a number of like 4 million.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Going forward, I mean, we have two huge other projects. You just mentioned, you know, the repair of the intake pumps, but we also have the main intake line. And I was looking through the budget. You said about $2.5 million. You need to replace that line, which it needs to be done. Is there any opportunity to get any other additional grant money from your perspective to do that line intake? Are we in a position to apply for more grants? Because I know it's a time-consuming, it's cumbersome, tons of paperwork, there's a lot of unknowns. But for the money that we're getting for this district and what it saved each consumer and the improvement of this system, do you know of anything else out there?
Yeah, there is right now they just released the program guidelines for the water energy conservation fund. What's great about the state is when they realized that they made a mistake and they put way too much money into greenhouse gas emissions pots of money that they thought they were going to get a lot of projects to do greenhouse gas emissions reductions, they're reallocating that money and throwing it into water. Well, you've got to have water savings, but you also have to have energy savings associated with it. So we've got some, you know, when you look at a $20,000 month in October of 2014 or whatever it was, we've got a potential to apply for it. That application will probably come out in January.
Okay.
And then you'll have a 30-day turnaround time. So that's why it's important, because it's important to understand why we move things forward. If we wait knowing that that's out there, you've got a 30-day time period to put in your application and prepare. It's a very technical document. If we don't have the plans and specifications and permits and have been through the environmental review, we can't submit an application. We have to have all of that in place, shovel ready to be able to submit your application. And that's why we've got that in the budget this year to get that ready to go.
that could cover the lake inlet pumps if it could be.
We could apply for that.
50 horsepower instead
Yeah,
of 200.
and in a, you know, maybe some type of a soft start or something that doesn't, doesn't
VFD,
sort
something.
out.
Yeah.
You know, if it saves a substantial amount of energy, yeah. Because our flow pump system is not designed for peak efficiency.
Well,
It really is.
if you have to be shovel ready by January, okay, we just started collecting information saying, okay, we knew that we pumped, I'm just gonna round numbers up, 60 acre-feet from the lake. And by the time we got to the plant, we're down to 50 acre-feet. We could easily calculate the amount of energy, so on and so forth, the water.
Oh, yeah.
And then, are we gonna be in a position to be shovel-ready in January to apply for, like, my thought is, I can't remember the numbers in the budget off the top of my head, but I remember that main distribution line being about $2.5 million, which, I mean, we can go back and say, okay, statistically, we had X number of losses, and now we're learning that 30% of them were here, and this much energy. I mean, we can show a lot of numbers and the energy tied to it, but will that be enough to put us in a position to compete for that grant?
We're going to do the design anyway.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we're planning to proceed with that anyway, because if we build it, we're not going to build it in chunks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
We're
that's
it would be it's too big of a pipe, it's too difficult. So we would be building it as a single project when we financed it. And that's another thing, you know, it may not be that program. We won't, if it's too much of a risk and too expensive to submit an application, and there's, you know, again, we're kind of getting off agenda topic.
Yeah, I agree.
But still, you're thinking the right way. We got to get projects ready to go. As long as there's Prop 1 money still rolling out, we should be ready to go. And this is Prop 84 money. There are some requirements associated with it, such as we'll still have to have the prevailing wage reports and have the certified payroll reviewed, and so we'll have to have that documentation and work with the Department of Industrial Relations. But this is, you're going to hear about this for 2 years. There's the last thing on it is that when you look at the budget numbers, that shows a cost share non-state funding source. That is a combination that is made up, that's on our end. It's not part of the reimbursement process. In other words, when we submit the reimbursement, we're not submitting a portion of the cost as constructed locally and a portion going to the state. It is, we have to have project records that show that we have invested that much in the project, and that is and I explained it in my staff report, for each of these projects, we've met that requirement. Service line replacement project, through the work that we've done over the last 2 years, the regional water use efficiency program, there's not a lot of that in local cost shares. We've exceeded that in our budget expenditures already for a cost share. We were lucky in that we met the requirement for a disadvantaged community, so we did not have to provide the mandatory match. So these are additional project costs that are not part of the financial match. They're work that we did anyway.
I'm going to start. Emery, questions?
No questions.
Russ? Jim? Dan?
Yeah, okay.
Any questions? Mr. West?
I'm looking at this first page. Well, it's page, I'm sorry. Page 110. We talked about $1 million, $1,547. Additional cost 5,555, 325. Total cost 1,556, 872. Are you saying that we've got to go spend $1,556, 872, and then we will be reimbursed for $1,000,001?
No. For example, under Project 1, we will submit a reimbursement very soon for $75,000 of that has already been spent.
So we're gonna spend 117.7 and ask for 75 back?
No, we've already spent the 12,700 on the well projects and on the water conservation activities and on the service line replacement projects in their program administration. And we're going to be requesting $105,000 in total. It'll be over probably 2 to 5 reimbursement requests to the state. But for each of those reimbursement requests that we submit, Wes, we're not submitting anything about the additional cost share. That's for our own record-keeping purposes that we have to manage that additional cost share.
Okay, so if we go out and we spend, the first one, we spend 105, we get 75 back.
No.
No.
We get 90% back of everything that we spend until the project completion report is done, and then they'll give us the final 10% back.
Okay, so we spend 105, we're gonna get 90% of that back.
Yes.
And then we spend 250 on the second one, we're gonna get 90% of that back.
Yes.
And the 262 on that number 2 has no meaning as far as cash in, cash out.
No, it's not going to show up on the reimbursement request.
And it's not going to show up in our cash in or cash out.
It already has.
It already has.
Yeah, okay.
All right, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, okay. In my staff report, I tried to convey that it's not going to, it won't cost us any more, other than the staff time, obviously, to oversee all of the activities associated with it. That's a cost, but it's not an additional out-of-pocket cost. There are some agreements that we'll have that will cost us, but will be reimbursed under this. There's no additional out-of-pocket cost in addition to the grant that's going to be reimbursed. We're not going to have to put out any more money.
Okay. All right. If there's no further questions on that one, we'll close that item off and we'll move to the last item on the agenda, which is item 5E, adoption of a resolution approving a new policy on district financial reserves. I read it and I didn't quite capture it.
Yes, didn't quite get it either.
So what are we doing?
Well, you're establishing a set of reserves that ultimately, when we, for example, let's just start with the first reserve item, the capital facility replacement reserve. Okay, when I say water and administration, there are certain things within our administrative office. We've got capital fixture, we have the building. What else do we have in administration that are major capital facilities? They have a useful life. They will be, they need to be replaced in the future. This is, in reality, this is your depreciation money. This is having a reserve that specifically is an amount of money that is based on studies that we do, that we say, here, if we're going to do all of this right and not put a burden on future generations, here's the amount of money we would need. Okay. And how much can we afford each year? And in reality, once you do that, that doesn't mean that future boards can't take it away or eliminate it or whatever, but when you establish reserves, they fall under very strict guidelines under the code. You lose some flexibility, let's put it that way. But you gain accountability because you're taking action to specifically say you're going to set this money aside for these purposes. And again, I want to let you know, as far as timeline, we're not up against a time crunch. If you want to have a little bit of time to absorb it, I'm not recommending you wait just for the purpose of waiting, but this is you know, it's a substantial step in making a statement to the public that we understand our infrastructure, we understand our issues,